content of this channel is for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell notification button. And please, feel free to share the video. Thank you. What's good, everybody? You know what it is. I am GG, and you're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. What's cracking? What's happening? What's happening? Now, before I get things started, man, I got to give a shout out to all of the members of the Green Gorilla channel. And let's start off that process now. I'd like to give a shout out to Deshaun Nolly, Brian Peaks, Mr. Lou Meth, Michael Ross, Nelso, Apex Prowler, Kareem Henry, Doc LaRock, Julius Ferguson, B. Hillfire, Jay Charles, Mark Hope, Lee Ways, Jeffrey Speed, The Nameless Protagonist, The Face, Rais Muajib, Mark Swift, Show Me, Black Dog, Odd Collar, Craig, Raphael Brown, Omni Americana, Deanne, Donald Watts, Barry Little, Ryan Jackson, HipHop.catv, Coach DC, The Remedy, Kashif Caldwell, Infamous Chillin', I Am Black Man, Nichita, True King 337, May Rest in Heaven, Force Windu, Mr. Blue Collar, Barnolas, Kyle J. Sura, I'm Just Jules, The Book of Ronin, Ab Media 83, Gemini Getting Knowledge. I'm a Gemini too, dog. Peace out to you, brother. Brian McMurray, TD Hip Hop Media, Drew Main, Shop Talk Live, Mr. Heat, Afro Analyst, Issa Abdul Zahir, Sir Anthony, ML Law, Charles Rogers, Universal 178, Blacksword 404, Rashid Barnes, Aaron Smith, DH, See Truth the Revelator, Gold Professor, Black Pill Ned Stark, Arthur Unknown, Dr. Tiasan Johnson, Brian Williams, Kalon Jakala, Ricky Dawson, Cedric Bowman, True 7360, BK Born Shaheed, James Washington, Hostile Adept, Seven Coast Dojo, W Pure One, Rogish the Billmonger, I Care, BGS Ibmore, Marvin Battle Jr., Pressure Prisoner, Taz, Kwaku 217, S. Haywood, Dragon 59, Supreme Ibmore, Adrian Hicks, Jay Bailey, Mr. Michi, Mo Mal, William Ruffin, and Asangwa. Shout out to y'all, man. Thank you so much for supporting the Green Gorilla channel and helping me to keep things going. So shout out to y'all, man. Y'all deserve a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Y'all deserve the highest honors, and that's honors. And you might be wondering at the current moment why I have the chat on members only. Well, it's only because quite recently I got some nasty or ignorant comments in the chat. I'm about to I'm not dealing with that, man. So for a minute, I'm gonna keep it members only in the chat. You feel me? So I don't have to deal with the riffraff and the nonsense. Now, I've always said that, we need to be bonding and building and moving and organizing. That's just my viewpoint. Now, some people say, no, I don't need to do that. I don't feel like we ought to be doing that. That's something I don't feel like I want to put my effort and energy into. Fine. But, you don't have to be disrespectful. And, I say offhand and off-putting things, but I know where my rage is placed. I know where my anger is directed. And it's not to black men in this space. It's against systems that are designed to place us in prison, to create and relegate us to social death. That's what I'm about. I'm not about all that other nonsense, man. So if you on that, go somewhere else where you can engage in that. Go grab your popcorn, go get you the love and hip hop experience, Go get you the ratchet television experience. Go get you the smack TV experience. But you're not going to get that here. Not here. It is what it is. So if you want to build, maintain, absorb some information, this is the right place. If you want to try to shake and move and, rip the heart out of the beast, we can do that. But I'm not about to be engaged in back and forth exchanges with guys who have no lives and who aren't committed to actually seeing us grow and to do better. Y'all can have that, man. You can just have that. I don't have no interest in that. So having said all that, for the most part, I've been trying to work on this project, the white people and black people, and I still have it as an end in mind. But the campaign failed. Let me switch scenes right quick before I move into what it is I want to do. Because, we got things to talk about and discuss related to, the firing line debate. But I just want to thank all of the men who put their money where their mouth was, who walked it like they talk it, who sing it like they bring it. I want to give a shout out to all of the men who dedicated themselves to donating towards the documentary in this space specifically. Thank y'all, man. Y'all deserve some fanfare, man. I appreciate y'all, man, y'all support. Even though it failed, it didn't garner the support of the men here, which I wish that it would have done because it could have been a net gain for everybody. I invited everybody I was instructed to invite to participate, but, I can't hate on it. I guess it wasn't in their self-interest. And so it is what it is. No disrespect to those guys, but just think, if the egos could have been checked, if risks could have been taken, if men would have actually organized and rallied around something concrete instead of talking, we could have had a piece out there that could have, established our image on our own terms. But instead, guys looked at it from a distance and said, I'm not going to support that. Whether, it was for good or bad reasons, whatever the case may be. But shout out to all the men who supported the documentary. And I'm still going to work on this project, man. I just know I got 100 good guys, 100, at least 100 good men who are willing to put their money where their mouth is. And not just talk. And not just sit on their hands and not beat their chest, but who are really actually going to, do something. Because something needs to be done. So, having said all that, man, shout out to those men. Big up. Y'all deserve a round of applause and some fanfare again. Thank y'all again, man. And let me just say this. I don't have a problem with failing, but I do have a problem with never making an attempt in the first place. That's where the failure comes from. Not doing anything at all. Not even making an attempt to change your environment or to work towards justice. So shout out to y'all, man. But I want to get right into what I was into the last time. I've been going through the firing line debate and I've been reacting to it. And so what I'm going to do is pick up from where I left off and I'm going to react as I go along. And look, Donald Watts, don't be discouraged, man. Like, look, I know money for black men is tight. It's tight for us all. Then you got this, this COVID thing going on. We already know the reality of black men's lives. and what they have to spare and what they don't have to spare. You know, it just is what it is. So don't ever be ashamed, you know, if you couldn't contribute. But, you know, my whole thing is you don't just have to contribute with bread. You could also contribute with promotion. But the campaign is done. I might start another one, but I already know where I made mistakes initially. And there's nothing wrong with admitting that you've ever made a mistake. So I apologize for not having the kind of gravitas, the kind of influence in the space to get, you know, it off the ground. I apologize, man. I just expected for men to see this as something positive and to just say, let's push. Yeah, let's do it. But you know, hey, all I saw was guys fighting with each other and doxing each other and saying pretty despicable things to each other and, you know, attacking each other's character. And, you know, I thought that was a shame, man. You know, but that's just my opinion. But having said all that, man, let's get to the business, you know, the proceedings this evening so I can get in and get out. So, of course, I've been, you know, exploring what's going on with this firing line debate. And I just found out that the debate actually aired in 1994. So it was the mid-90s, you know, where this thing actually came out. So anyway, let's continue to peep it out, check it out, and I'll comment as I go along. Let's do that. Previously on the Green Gorilla channel.
The women's movement has accomplished certain goals encouraged by sensible people, and yet at the same time it is a disaster. The founder of the National Organization of Women, whose idea of a perfect culmination of feminism would be when the commandant of the Citadel announced a school holiday to celebrate her abortion. She used the following sentence, quotes, "Feminism has no happy role and can boast of almost no legislative victories. Its ideology is still, and its spokespersons are bitter." Because of the excesses of the movement, Mr. Chairman, that we conclude that what began as the affirmation of rights became instead the nightmare we now designate as a disaster.
I cannot take the women's movement for equality as a joke. It has been perhaps the most life-affirming, life-opening development of modern democracy. Women defined only in sexual relation to man, only as wife, mother, sex object, housewife, server of physical needs of husband, children, home, never as a person, defining herself by her own actions in society. Well, I'm BJ's wife, I'm Junior and Janie's mommy, I'm a putter on of diapers and a server of meals, but who am I?
30 years ago, Betty Friedan launched the women's movement with a feminine mystique at the same time that Lyndon Johnson launched the Great Society. 30 years later, we can look back and say that both the women's movement and the Great Society were spectacular disasters. They contributed to the breakup of the American family, and they also contributed to the politicization of American life. Somewhere along the way, the women's movement went wrong. Well, I'm arguing that the women's movement was born wrong. It was born on the wrong side of the ideological tracks, and it was born on the wrong side of history, because it glamorized, it idealized the masculine realm.
I'm known as someone who has many deep criticisms of the women's movement, but what I have constantly said is that if we could return to what Betty Friedan was saying at the beginning, we would be on the right track. I agree with you, Ariana, that in point of fact, certain elements in the women's movement have gone too far, and there has been a kind of denigration of the role of woman and mother. I agree with that. But feminism at its best is all about options.
Depressed, trying to look 20 when they're over 60, unable to accept that they're older, desperately trying to pretend they never wanted to marry a man who didn't want to marry them, desperately trying to pretend they never wanted a baby. You know, this is the kind of pathetic demonstration of the poster child of the feminist movement, still the same as it was 30 years ago.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Both of you. Time is up.
Okay.
You're free.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Elizabeth Fox Genovese, it's your chance to make an opening statement.
It certainly is a measure of the complexity of what's going on with the women's movement these days that I find myself on the side I am in this debate. Let's start with the question, which women's movement and whose women's movement? For years, I have counted myself an unswerving supporter of the movement for women's formal equality in society. I have no desire to return to a world in which a married woman cannot get credit in her own name, or a woman cannot get the same pay as a man for equal work. By the same token...
Hold on. Wait for it, though. Let me get the launcher ready. Wait for it. Now, at this point, I can't say anything but to some extent agree. We can't go backwards. There's no way to go back to the point where women can't have their own bank accounts. Women can't sign their own contracts. Women can't engage independently of men in their own day-to-day social and political activities. You can't go back. You can't walk that back. Nor should we be trying to walk that back. But now we have to deal with the consequences associated with these newfound freedoms of women and how they impact family life and how they impact not just women's lives, but other people in the society's lives. Because one can argue you have a responsibility, a duty to others beyond just yourself. Yeah, I mean, there's this political idea that, I can act independently of others and I'm free to do whatever it is I want to do. However, when it comes to morality, you got to begin to think. You might do something, but if what you're doing has an impact on the outcome of other people's lives, then it becomes a moral problem. Okay? So having said all that, let's just get right back into it.
I'm not much interested in statist interventions to ensure that a woman gets the same pay as a man for different and unequal work.
So I'm outside of the club and he think I'm a pawn. So I go to my heavy cherry and pop the trunk.
Now look, let me just say, I agree with her there 100%. You got formal equality, which guarantees that women have the same opportunities in the marketplace and in the political sphere as men. But the problem comes paramount when you move beyond formal equality and you begin to ask for equality of outcome in comparison to other persons. That's when things become problematic, because then it requires more than just formal political equality. It requires state intervention into ensuring, it requires subsidization of women to have as much as or more than the so-called high value men. Now, this is where things become a little sketchy and problematic. But anyway, let us proceed.
Is the problem we are confronting. If we were indeed talking about the movement that Betty Friedan had launched, I would be wholeheartedly on that side. That is not the movement we are talking about, since it has been superseded by another women's movement, which means that it is the women's movement of today, not the women's movement of the past, that I regard as a disaster and which has landed me on the side I'm on.
Now notice what she said. She's not in disagreement with the original impetus behind the movement, which was a movement for formal equality. But the argument she's making is the movement has morphed into something different. It's asking for more than formal equality. It's asking for parity of outcome related to the differences in the way that women engage the market than from the way men engage the market. So this is where we are now. Okay, and at least in the past, men and women were willing to have debates. They were willing to converse and argue these points in a public forum. But at the current moment, there is no argumentation, there is no debate, there is no dialogue, exchange of reasons at all. All there is the charge of misogyny, and in the case of black men, misogynoir. If this group of political ideologues don't get what they want, how they want, when they want. And this is the seat of the problem. The problem is not formal political equality, social and political equality, but it's the method and the means by which they're going about it, by means of shaming and guilting, by means of charging an entire demographic with the most pernicious and the most evil of motives. One could argue, how is this going to be able to stand and persist throughout time? But, that's just a question. Let's proceed.
Thank you very much. Does someone have a question for the professor?
Professor, I have read some of your work on Southern women, and it's brilliant work. And I want to remind you that if there had not been the modern women's movement, the whole contribution of people like you, the whole study of women's history, women had been virtually blotted out of history, of the Civil War, of the history of the South, which is your specialty. And women like yourself who are making enormous contribution now in every field, that has been made possible by the modern women's movement. Further, I would think you would have to agree that the women's movement for equality, which is in the society now, which has made it possible for your students to aspire the way they do, has enormous diversity you could not have now that the great majority of American women identify with the general movement to equality, even if they don't always call themselves feminists. You couldn't have a movement taking in so many women and have only one voice. The diversity of voices, my voice is still there, and the major thrust of the women's movement for equality, as I helped organize it, is still the basis of it. There are a lot of diverse new voices, and they argue and they are opposed, and I'm as opposed to some of it, and I think some of it's silly, and I think some of it's diversionary.
Now, this is the million-dollar question. Why is there not, at the current moment, an exposition, a detailing about what is actually diversionary or outlandish about contemporary feminism? If it's the case that there are women who think that things are out of hand, that they're asking for too much, that they're going too far, where is the voice of reason? Where is it? That's the question that I would like to ask for people who hold positions like Betty Friedan. Where are you? Where are you? But, I digress. Let me keep pushing.
Okay.
But the basic movement for equality, wouldn't you agree?
I will take that as a question. That is a question. I do agree on the movement for formal equality. What I do not agree with is that the women's movement, having discovered that formal equality is not enough, is going to change the entire world in order to engineer a substantive equality. Furthermore, I would add on this score, elite women have done extremely well. Upscale women, I have benefited inordinately, as have all of us. We are not typical, and as we have done better, other women have done worse. Today, the typical working woman is a mother, and the typical mother is a working woman, and the official feminist movement has nothing to say serious about the relation between taking care of children and enjoying and benefiting from work, the balancing of career, and
don't you think that's tendentious? The truth.
But now, before this woman is going to interject, and you'll see who the woman is and what her name is. But here's the deal. For most people who work is not something that's enjoyable. It's something that's necessary. It's compulsory. These are a group of elite white women who were bored and they felt constrained by their circumstances. And so what they fought for was the capacity and the ability to engage the market on their own terms. Okay, so cool. You got that now. All right, there we are. But now something different is occurring. And the very thing, the impetus behind the movement didn't really apply to all women, for one. Like take black women for instance, or for example. Black women have always been working in one form or fashion or another. They've always been engaged in the market because they had to. They had to. And other kinds of women from different demographics also had to work. They had to in order to make ends meet. But here you take a group of women who are pushing for what's in their best interest without acknowledging the interest of other people and the impact it would have over their lives. Most people are not engaged in rewarding professions. I mean, people convince themselves, oh, I love to go to work. Really? Do you really love to go to work? Come on, man. Let's be honest. Work for most people is drudgery and toil. It's not fun. You get bossed around. You get told what to do. You get micromanaged. Unlike professionals who have some autonomy in the way that they work and in the kind of engagement they have with the duties and responsibilities associated with those professions. But most people, when they go to work, would prefer not to. They want to be on a vacation. They feel like they're not making enough. They find it hard to keep the lights on, gas on, cable bill on, telephones going. This is the condition of most people in America. So what to them is freedom might not necessarily translate into freedom for the multitude. Not only just women, but people in general. This is a privileged conceptualization of what work gives to a person. And I mean, how dare these privileged white women make the case that everybody needs to go to work when the kind of work they're doing is way better than the kind of work that most people in the country have to perform. But, hey, let's keep pushing.
The truth of the matter is that it's the women's movement that's addressed itself in large measure to questions like, do you share responsibility for raising children? What do you do in terms of providing for safe spaces for children when people have to work? It's the women's movement that said something is really desperately wrong when women are marginalized in our economy and therefore don't have the kinds of resources they need as they get older to be able to sustain themselves in dignity. I mean, when I talk about the women's movement, I mean women like you and like me and the women here and the women over there who have, regardless of whether they belong to the National Organization for Women or some other organization of that kind, still speak out of their real experience. I mean, that was the genius of Betty's book. What she said is, look, and Emma Goldman said it too, equal rights and the right to vote are all very good in their way, but true emancipation begins in a woman's soul. And you don't believe what you're saying here about it being a disaster. What you believe is that some positions that have been taken by some parts of this movement are ill-founded, unwise, and ultimately counterproductive.
And my response to that is, look, you've said that, right? There's some parts of the movement that have gone too far. But where do you hear this now? Where's the voice of reason now? Where is it? Nobody is addressing the problematic parts of feminism. What ends up happening is people get shamed, they get guilted into being quiet, or when people actually do say something, they get doxxed, or they get canceled, or they get called misogynist. Now, how can you have a reasonable debate and begin to talk about what these women are actually admitting to? How do you get people to talk about it when everybody refuses to say anything other than to, lead with you a hater, you just hate women? Like I said before, man, these debates are nothing new. These issues are nothing new. They may be new to us, but they're not new to them. This is 1994. What is it now? 2021. So that's how many years? 30 years, man. Damn near 30 years. And we still haven't had an upfront, open, candid, and honest debate about how some of these issues and how these policies and how this movement has impacted lives beyond those who are most privileged. But, I digress. Let's keep it pushing.
But a lot has been done that's been important, and you've benefited from it. And so
I think it's time that we make the invitation to come to this side of the stage.
Now watch what this woman does, though, because she's going to respond cleverly to this charge. I mean, and look, these women, that woman in particular, okay, Genovese, she comes out and she says, look, I don't have a problem with second wave feminism at its onset as it called for formal political equality. But as more and more the people who are in the movement call for state intervention, I think it's going in the wrong direction. It's becoming disastrous on account of that. And so the response is not to actually talk about, discuss, or mention the problems, but it's always to talk about what's positive, what's bright, and what's rosy about it for them, but not about the impact that it has on anybody else. And that's a problem. But that's classic deflection. Let's keep pushing.
Successful dodge of the women's movement has been that each of us has our own opinion, that it doesn't really speak for any of us, that there are multiple feminisms, and we all know that we all agree because we all benefit from it.
And that's a masterful strategic move. So if you say, look, here's the problems I have with feminism, what's the first thing that a feminist is going to say? Well, I don't think that. My feminism is different. The way I think about it is different. So at every step, they're able to evade any problems associated with it. They never have to answer for it because they always can sidestep it and say, well, feminism is a multifaceted and a multi-pronged kind of movement and ideal. And so therefore, the kind of feminism I advocate for is male-friendly. Or some other such, deflection or sidestep. But when, the rubber hits the road, they are not to be found. All they do is just keep evading. It's a wild goose chase. How do you pin it down? You don't get to ever talk about what the problems are. All you talk about is what the benefits are to you. But it's a clever strategy to avoid having to be accountable for the impact that the positioning has on other people. But let me keep pushing.
Well, this is enough of that. There are a series of women's organizations that, with the help of the media, are invariably consulted on all important issues, and are taken to be the women's movement. It is taken to be disrespectful, unsisterly, and frequently treasonous to challenge them in any way.
I was just speaking about this. You can't say anything to these people. As soon as you criticize them, it's like being, in the room with somebody who thinks that they're perfect, or being in a relationship with someone who thinks that they're perfect. They never apologize. Their egos are big, but they're fragile. They have righteous indignation about what they consider to be injustice, but they never are able to entertain what other people think about what they consider to be injustice and how their lives are panning out related to these kinds of policies. Nobody is willing to entertain it. It's people shutting other people down, calling them treasonous, traitors. It's the equivalent of black people calling somebody a coon. That's just how this goes. Okay? So let me keep pushing.
Therefore, in private, Karen Bernstein and Camille Paglia and all the rest of us have our own private modifications of the official line. When Felice Schwartz proposed the mommy track, and when Betty Friedan wrote the second stage, they were trashed by the official women's movement. Shared parenting assumes you've got a father at home. Daycare assumes that we know that it is better for children to be out of their home than with one of their parents. The list could go on. I don't want to use up other people's time, but it simply is not honest to claim that the women's movement has seriously engaged the issues that are of most concern to American women and men. These are all of our top priorities. Thank you.
And look, at least this woman is willing to encapsulate how these policies impact more than just the individual women themselves, which is what you hardly ever get when you have conversations related to people who consider themselves to be promoters and advocates of this ideal, the feminist ideal, or if they are or consider themselves as a feminist. And at least she's willing to say, look, you assume that women need these services. Well, what about the kids? What about the children? You assume that sending children to childcare is the best kind of policy related to their development and their education. What if it's not? What if it's the case that women need to be able to, and men need to be able to have intimate contact with their children in the earliest stages of development, and that sending them off to daycare or childcare is not the way for them to develop the most robust talent index possible? Maybe we're making a mistake. Maybe as you cavort in the world trying to prove that you're valuable and your personhood is intimately connected to what men have traditionally been doing, maybe you're missing something. Maybe you're leaving out a vital component that you're not going to be able to see the consequences of until later on. But hey, I digress, man. I want to get back to the lecture, man. So let's do it.
Judge Burstein, it's your turn. It's your turn. You have a chance to make an opening remark.
How fortuitous.
Now, this woman is a judge, very smart, very intelligent, used to be a congressperson in New York City, okay? And, I mean, she is intelligent as hell, and she makes good arguments. I don't agree with some of what she says. I agree with some of what she says. But I mean, ultimately, I think more than anything else, and I've said this before, the women's movement is myopic because they're only worried about themselves and the impact that these policies have on their lives. They're not worried about what's happening to other people's lives as a consequence of their own ambition to enter into spaces that have been traditionally reserved for men. Now, as a black man, I can honestly say you can't really charge black men with any of this disdain and this animus because we don't control those institutions. We didn't make those laws which restricted or prevented women from being able to have anything. We just didn't. But yet and still, there are people who are willing to collapse class concerns, racial concerns, and to lump men all into one big pot and to stigmatize and to berate us just in virtue of the fact that we are men. And then they think it's their duty to re-socialize us so as to make us more palatable to them. But the question is, when are men going to say, look, my life is like, you don't want my life to be centered or your life to be centered around mine. I don't want my life writ large to be centered around yours either, especially if you are saying that, kill men now, ask me how. Men are the enemy. Who wants to be surrounded by that kind of animus and enmity perpetually? I know I don't. And it leads to all kinds of policies, legislation, and activities and attitudes that are just nasty. This is not balance in the end, is the argument that I'm making. But, I digress. I just want to keep pushing because we got like maybe about 15 more minutes of this.
You have something you want to say, too.
Well, what I really want to say is that this is not the most useful mechanism for exploring this issue. The truth of the matter.
That's out of bounds, I'm afraid.
I'm sorry, but I feel compelled to say what I think is the truth, which is that there isn't such a thing as a monolithic women's movement. I was thinking about preparing for this. I said this to Helen before I came, and I decided I better not because I would have had to bring, the Book of Esther and Lysistrata and some of the works of the early suffragists and Betty's work and the work of Elizabeth Fox Genovese. And so I think that we should start with the proposition that it is impossible to say that the women's movement has been a disaster because women are in movement, and in a lot of ways what they've been able to do is experience themselves as full human beings. And they have been able to have a voice, and it becomes critical for them to have a voice because they're part of the human race. And unless their voice is able to, unless that voice exists, what happens is the dialogue is just too shrunken. It's too little. It doesn't get to these questions. And the truth is that these matters, for example, matters about what we will do with our children. These questions of how do we make relationships that are meaningful and continuing, and how do we connect in community. These are ideas that are better, for the most part, in this last period of time. Now, I don't think that it's a function of gender. I think it's a function of socialization. Have been better addressed.
Look, notice a function of socialization. The communication is better. The situation is better. For who? Just them. I'm being honest here, man. Just them. Because when you start to think about community, what kind of community do we have? And this is something that Ariana Huffington had already mentioned, and I did that on the rerun, or the playback. The Great Society, coupled with the feminist movement, has fractured families in ways that have never been done before. And one could argue, okay, women's lives are better off as a result of it. But what about children's lives and how they're raised and what they expect in relation to connecting with others and starting families for themselves? And notice how she said women and their children. It's as if children are solely the possession of women. And we know that historically that has not always been the case. I've said that there was an act in Britain that was put forth, I think 1839 was the year, where women were able to finally have custody of their children, whereas children were, prior to that time, seen as the sole possession of their fathers. But now we've swung the pendulum in the other direction. But the question is, okay, how can we get it to actually be balanced and equal as opposed to just one-sided? Because if it was unjust for men to have sole possession of children, then why is it now okay for women to just have sole possession of children? Because it takes two to tango. I didn't, go into any relationship assuming that, okay, this woman is going to have the children. They're hers, not ours in conjunction. But I found out the hard way. This is how it goes. Mama's baby, daddy's maybe. But it wasn't always that way. Right? And so that's just my side piece. Let me keep pushing.
More generally addressed by women. And if there's something to be taken from this, it is, in fact, that absent that voice, there would be a deafening silence on these issues.
Don't go away. Don't go away. Helen Alvarez.
Such as how to combine the burdens of work and family at the same time. First, I would be with Professor Fox-Genovese that there is such a thing as a women's movement that is most regularly consulted by the press, taken to be the women's movement, and they, in fact, ran a program on this at a Boston convention a few years ago and had 15 women show up. If it really was the case that addressing that central problem, what women really want to hear about today, was being done, then why is it the question that we have achieved abortion on demand for 9 months for any reason as the law of the land, and you still can't get child support if you're a woman who has custody of your children? Why can we have all of one and so little of the other?
Helen, I think
Now, before she answers that question, this is still gynocentric to me. Okay, so her putting forth the idea, okay, well, these women want abortion, but when they do have children, they can't get support for the children. Well, what kind of social circumstances have been set up or established to where women consider themselves to be the sole custody providers for children? It wasn't always this way. Again, like I said before, mothers' pensions programs were the way that women, widowed women, were initially given subsidies by the state in order to be able to care for their children absent the father, because the father either died of natural causes or he died during war. But eventually those programs expanded and they morphed into the ADC. Okay? And then subsequently the AFDC. So now you have a situation in which women are being given support. They've won the right to divorce with no fault. Policies that have had an impact. And now this child support law, but here's the wicked thing about it. At any point during the stage of development of a child, a woman can opt out. A woman can say, I don't want to take care of these kids anymore. I can't do it. She can abort a child. She can, at any time, turn the children in, and say, I can't handle it. And she will be given all support. But let a man say, look, I can't take care of this kid anymore. I can't handle the responsibility. He's going to go to jail, especially if there's already a support order in place. So all of this is gynocentric to me. But that's just my viewpoint. Let me keep pushing.
important thing is that we shouldn't confuse what the media determines, constitutes a movement or an activity with what actually happens in people's lives and the kinds of questions that are addressed by people and the kinds of issues that are brought to consciousness as a function of their presence. And so let me tell you very concretely that when I was a legislator in 1972, 3 women for the first time sat in the New York State Senate. No before that, there'd never been more than 1. And when we came to the legislature, we were Democrats on the Senate side. On the Assembly, there were Republicans and conservative women. For the first time, we had on the agenda child support enforcement legislation. For the first time, we had full financial disclosure in divorce actions. For the first time, we had some pregnancy disability coverage.
But individual examples of this do not make the national trend. The national trend is opposite that.
Helen, the fact is that the national trend is to the extent that women begin to enter these places of power, for example, the legislature or the Congress or even the United States Supreme Court, questions that otherwise were not even seen as critical ones begin in fact to be discussed. Now,
but
wait,
that still doesn't answer the question why we have all of abortion
enough,
and very little of child support,
Helen,
say 26 years after NOW's founding.
Helen, the fact of the matter is that there are very, I said when we came to the legislature, all of a sudden these issues got addressed. They didn't get solved because there were only 3 of us out of 60.
Mrs. Huffington. Mrs. Huffington. Ariana, do you have a question?
Now this exchange is going to get a little rough between them two. I'm just letting you know ahead of time. It's about to get rough between them. But, hey.
I think it's incredible that you really still believe that all problems are going to be solved if only the correct legislation is passed. We've been passing the right legislation for years now, and every single cultural indicator has been getting worse, from violent crime to divorce statistics to everything you want to look at. So on what is your faith in legislative solutions to social problems based?
Well, it's a very good question. If that's what I said, you would really put me right up against the wall, Ariana. But the truth of the matter is I didn't say that my belief is that everything should be resolved by legislation. I simply said to you that there were matters of the kind Helen addressed that got addressed in legislatures because women were there. I will say that legislation is sometimes necessary. I'm sure you would agree with me in that regard. Certainly, I don't know, I assume you're a citizen now. You like to vote. You wouldn't have been able to if we hadn't had a change in our Constitution. That came out of the women's movement.
I'm not clear how my voting came out of the women's movement. I missed that.
Well, I think, Ariana, this is the problem about coming to the country 14 years ago. Because, you see, you didn't go to school.
Now, see, they're about to start, disrespecting each other and stuff like that. But I think Ariana is stuck on the second wave of feminism and where it starts at from Betty Friedan. And this woman here is going back to the first wave of feminism, which is the suffragette movement. And, I got something to say about the suffragette movement, man, which to me, you got to think. All these women are now beginning to pop up and appear in Congress and so on and so forth and, have influence over corporations and so on and so forth, in the media, so on and so forth. But where are the black men at? And these women were willing to throw black men under the bus when they wasn't able to get what they wanted. The first thing they started to appeal to was the ignorance, the innate pathology, and the ontological, evil of black men. That's what they appealed to in order to make sure that they were able to gain the right to vote. Those are the kind of arguments that they made. And ultimately, they won those arguments, not necessarily by means of having good arguments, but they won those arguments because their men were persuaded by those arguments. Namely, we're your mothers, your daughters, your sisters, your aunties, your nieces. Why pick these darkies, especially black men who are dumb, ignorant? Why get them to vote? Why have them be able to have an impact over our lives before us, who are dedicated to you, who are intimately connected to you? And they won that argument. They won that battle. But I digress. Let me keep pushing.
With all of us, and you didn't learn about the early suffragists, and you didn't learn about the First World War and the impact that it had on women's self-perceptions and the capacity that women then had. Well, that's very productive.
You know what is fascinating here? If she was a conservative making comments like that about somebody just because I'm an immigrant, just because I'm a naturalized American,
Ariana,
Ariana, you
But
made...
because...
Ariana,
no,
you know...
1 second. Because she's a liberal, she can say anything. I'm sorry, Betty. Shut up, I'm talking.
Ariana, let me tell you, let me answer
No,
this.
just 1 second, just 1 second. I want you to let me finish.
I will let you finish.
Just because I was not born in this country, just because I went to school at Cambridge rather than here, does not mean I have not studied. It does not mean I have not learned about the women's movement. And to make that assumption is absolutely unbelievable. And you are only getting away with it just because you're a liberal. And if you're a conservative, you would not have got away with it.
Ariana, let me say something back to you. The truth is that I know that you're an extraordinarily intelligent person, and I know that you're also an extraordinarily educated person. So that when you said to me, I don't understand the relationship of the women's movement to the question of suffrage, I thought to myself, it can't be that she doesn't understand what is a historical fact. It must be that she doesn't know it. And therefore, rather than claim that it was a function of your not paying attention to material that you could have learned, I thought I would give you a good excuse.
Thank you very much.
Am I done?
You're all set.
Now notice, this is a lesson here. Now, peep this out. Now, notice how they're disrespecting each other cleverly and, attacking each other with witticism as opposed to just coming at each other like, nigga, fuck you, nigga. But I digress, man. I just had to make that point. I'll kill you. Notice how they're arguing with one another versus how some of the disagreements and the conflicts we have take place. But, I digress. I digress, man.
The only man here tonight on the either side, here's the chance for the 4 women on the opposing side to ask him a question. Catherine Colbert.
Check him out. Look at
this. In your
this.
statement, you indicated that women participating in the military and women having the right to choose abortion were in some ways demeaning to them and therefore demonstrated that the movement was a disaster. But in fact, it is those very things, the fact that women can now equally participate with men in the military, have the same obligations and the same duties, as well as the same disadvantages as men, that have led...
This is just pure fantasy, man. This right here is just absolute ridiculous, man. Women don't have the same responsibilities. They don't have the same capacities in relation to being able to serve in a military capacity. They just don't, man. But we have to pretend that they do in order to what? Make sure that they're recognized and that they're visible and that they feel like they're persons. There is nothing wrong with different people having different talent indexes or different capacities and powers and still being able to contribute towards improving the lot of the collective. Whether it be a small collective like a family or the largest collective, which is an entire nation state. In fact, if people did exactly the same thing and there was no division of labor and there weren't people with different talent indexes, we wouldn't have the capacity to cooperate and to make things be harmonious in the ways that we do. Just imagine that the only skill that everybody had was to play the drums, and you went to go see a jazz quartet, and then you got a whole 4 drummers playing the drums. That shit wouldn't be, and I'm not saying that, drums, can't be used polyrhythmically in order to make beautiful, sounds or whatever the case like that, or rhythms. But damn, you need a bass player who plays bass. You need a horn player who plays the horn. You need a drummer who plays the drums. You need a keyboard player who plays the keys. You don't need these people to be interfering with each other's jobs and taking on each other's roles in order to prove their worth. Be good at what you do. Contribute the way you can. That's just my opinion about it. But, I'm digressing again.
many respects to changes in their ability to progress in other areas of the world. And similarly, the right to choose abortion has meant that women have the ability to make childbearing decisions, both to choose abortion and to choose
This is a question about what I
family.
think.
And the question I have for you is, why can't...
Check Bill out, look. Bill's like, ask me a question, man. Don't give me a damn speech. Ask me a question. He's pissed off, but look, he's playing it off. Check him out.
Or why is it that real progress you denigrate and expect that change has to come so quickly that just because we haven't accomplished all of our goals,
What's your question?
It's been a disaster.
Her question is, why do you assume that progress has to come right away, and why do you denigrate all of their goals because not all of them have been achieved? That seems to be a question to me.
Yeah, it's a question. It's a question.
Look, he white knighted her. Look, he came in and saved her ass. Look. He came in and white knighted her. Look, Bill, look, watch what Bill says.
That's a wonderful exercise in compression, and I congratulate you.
Just repeating what she said.
You of course, transform a favorite word of your movement, what I said. What I said was that so fanatical is the support for abortion in the women's movement that no thought is permitted to be given to whether or not there might be certain rights that inhere in the fetus. I think it is at least a subject that can and ought to be discussed, but it isn't discussed, nor, in my judgment, is serious attention given to whether it is appropriate for a woman to engage in trench warfare with bayonets and so on and so forth. Now, it is considered an affront on the women's movement to suggest that it is inappropriate for a 19-year-old woman, or for that matter, a 90-year-old woman, to engage in a jungle warfare using bayonets. And it makes me sound, God, Betty, are you that disgusted by what I'm saying?
That's crazy. So look, we already know, man. I've already gone over this, man. They've already done the studies. Men and women mixed units don't perform as well as male-only units. Now, warfare is no longer conventional in the way that it used to be, where, warfare is being conducted like it was in the Vietnam War. But there's nothing to say that it won't ever again occur that way. Because, you can have all the technology in the world, but if, there's a group of people who are committed to seeing your undoing, they will undo you. The United States had the military technological advantage over the Viet Cong. But the Viet Cong didn't lie down. But they also had home court advantage. They knew the terrain of their country in ways that, the West just didn't. So, but the larger point I'm making is, come on, man. Look, we know women are not going to be able to do the things that men are going to be able to do on a battlefield. But I digress, man. Let me keep pushing, man.
It makes me feel sort of as though I'm engaging in anti-feminist warfare to suggest that we should do the fighting and that you have enough responsibilities as it is. Now, why is that not considered an open question by the women's movement? Why do you all want to go to the Citadel?
Betty Friedan.
And look, they want to go to the Citadel, which you ought to know. If you've ever served in the military, you ought to know it's a military school. Okay, the Citadel. Why would women want to go to the Citadel? And the answer is obvious. Because if they are able to go to the Citadel, it's going to open up, opportunities for them in other areas and arenas of the society. So if they're able to, be officers in the armed forces, then they're going to have influence in the corporate world, in the academy, and in governmental bodies, official governmental bodies. That's just the facts. So this is why they want to go there, because they know it's going to open up doors for them elsewhere. Now, be damned the efficacy, the efficiency, and productivity of the military itself What's more important is them opening up doors for themselves in other areas and arenas. Now, they're all for this shit until one of them gets smacked in the face with an M16. I'm going to tell you, man, war is nasty. Even fights on the street are nasty. But when you start to open up this can of worms, if you're able to fight in the military, it's all over, man. No more discussions about, domestic violence and all this. You got the same right to fucking fight and get hurt just like anybody else. There's no need for special privileges and protections. There's no need for it. But that's just my opinion. Because what is somebody going to say if you got a bayonet raised at them, or a gun or a knife raised at them? Are they supposed to be like, oh, that's a woman with a knife? They're going to be like, no, that's the fucking enemy. This bitch is going to try to kill me. So she got to go before I go. Bottom line. But anyway, that's just my viewpoint, man. Let me keep pushing.
Well, you know that women, I think very responsibly, when we demand equal rights and fight for equal rights and an equal voice, we have to accept equal responsibility.
Whoa, hold on. Say it again. But here's the problem with it. So if you got equal rights, you have to share the responsibilities. I've been saying this all along. If you have the same rights as men, then you have the same responsibilities as men. You can't oscillate back and forth and say, well, I'm a woman now and I want to be given the same privileges associated with traditional womanhood, and then move into another sphere of activity and say, well, I want this equality. You got to treat me just like a man, just like you would treat anybody else. No, you don't. You don't want that. And you can tell by the kind of policies that you're advocating for. You don't want to be, hit on at the job. You don't want to be, hit on in the house, even though half of the time y'all are the ones initiating the violence in the context of the home. You don't want to share the responsibilities of children, really, because you want to be able to dominate and control the situation with those children. Because a lot of times those children can be used as bargaining chips and they get you money. Okay? And they enable you to get support from the state. So it's a whole bunch of problems associated with these ideas and how women sometimes oscillate back and forth in between, wanting equality and still wanting to hang on and preserve, the privileges normally associated with being a woman. But the larger issue is, first of all, come on, man. Do you want 19-year-old girls, man, fighting alongside you in a foxhole, man? I mean, let's just be honest about that, man. But nobody wants to be honest about this. We're going to continue to, show. Like yesterday, I saw, before I went to bed, I watched Coming to America 2. And man. So Wesley Snipes, the actor who performed and starred in the movie Blade, who was Nino Brown in New Jack City. Now, we know it's all an act. But 3 underage girls no older than 20 years of age, man, were able to whip his ass with sticks. Now, come on, man. Let's just be honest about this, man. There ain't no way for that to happen, man. And all to what? What is the point of that? What is the point of demonstrating that? Do I think women can lead cerebrally? Yeah, I think that they're capable and they have those capacities. But as it pertains to physical implementation of dominance on a battlefield, come on, man. Like, we just got to be honest about that. But whatever, man. Y'all can believe what you want. Let me keep pushing, man.
And we cannot, my own position on that question was, I am very opposed, for instance,
This is a
to
question.
nuclear warfare or to
These are the rules,
women
all right, yeah?
fighting, or men fighting, my sons or my daughters, in any unjust and unnecessary war, which I think would all war
We're not
is
talking
today.
about whether
but
this,
if there is
this
such
action
a thing
is just
as a
or
just
unjust,
and necessary
we're talking
war,
about whether
women
or not
have
the
the
women's
same
movement
responsibility.
permits.
Come on, man. Like, look. Imagine this. And I'm just saying. I'm gonna draw the allusion to a band again. Okay? A jazz band. Imagine, or let's say a hip hop, like act or something like that. Dude, if you can't run the turntables, which they don't even do anymore, but when I was young, you used to have DJ. If you can't DJ, bro, you don't need to be on the wheels of steel, man. Period. You don't need to be on the wheels, bro. If you can't keep the music going from on the ones and twos, you don't need to be back there controlling the music. Now you got an obligation. Yeah, I mean, it is true. Some men are weaker than other men. There will be interspersed here and there some women who are capable, more physically astute than some men. But on average, as a whole, the top tier of men are going to be able to whip a troop of women's asses. They're going to be able to shoot the weapons more quickly, move the weapons more quickly, and be able to get shots off more accurately. These are the facts, man. So we just got to be honest and candid about this kind of stuff, man. I ain't trying to knock women, man. But I think that what men are frustrated with is not even being able to have these kind of conversations in earnest out in the open. And that's a problem, man. There's a dearth of reality. But, I digress again, man. Let me get back to this, bro, because we only got like 2 more minutes of it.
We're talking about whether or not the women's movement has become so monolithic
Not monolithic.
as not to permit serious questions on such matters.
Well, I'll answer it. I mean, I'll tell you right now,
You're
I don't
not
think a
supposed to
90-year-old woman should.
Now, look. Bill is telling her, look, wait, first of all, this is Bill's platform, man. It's his. Look, he's a conservative, man. I don't agree with all of the talking points of conservatism, especially as it explains away race as a determinant in the material well-being of black folks in this country. I think they're disingenuous when they try to skirt around these issues, which they do rather cleverly. Okay? But there are some things that I think are beneficial related to the conservative position, okay? Especially as it pertains to social values. But damn, this is this man's platform. And she's doing what she wants in that platform. And not only that, this woman is a judge. So she knows what rules and procedures are. And she was once in the Senate in New York. So she knows damn well whether she should be or not be breaking the rules in order to make her own points express. But, it is what it is. Let me keep pushing.
Engage in trench warfare. I'm pointing out to you, Bill. I'm not going to ask you a question. The point is, Bill, that if you make a straw person like that, I mean, obviously, it becomes clear that it's entirely improper of anybody to believe what we believe, because it leads to the proposition that a 90-year-old is going to be fighting in trench warfare. I want to go away from that for a moment. I want to ask you something I thought was really interesting. Do you really think it's such a terrible thing to call a person a spokesperson? I understand it's offensive, but apparently Phyllis Schlafly has even adopted it. I got your point there. But do you really think that there is not a virtue in trying not to pretend that there is a generic in the English language for a species that has both men and women?
Okay.
I think it is an index of a total perversion of taste and of a fanatical attention details that are not only insignificant, but absolutely unmusical in their consequences.
Camille Paglia. Quick question from Camille Paglia.
A man sitting next to me there introduced himself to me. He was Haley Barber. He'd been in Congress a long time. He said, "Oh, you know, a liberal, by the way. We used to
Haley Barber?
We used to call Liz. We used to refer to Congressperson Liz Holdsperson. It leads to that
Should
kind
be
of
distortion. You didn't even go. No, that's not what I asked you, Bill. What I asked you is there no merit? Of course you can have some objection about particular words, but is there no merit, for example, to removing from us the assumption that every time you talk about a human being, you should use the word he? And instead substituting for that the notion that occasionally you should
what is
use
objectionable is that you should construe the use of he as offensive to women, in which case the entire English literature of the last 1,000 years becomes.
No, I've got to cut you all off. Thank you very much, sir. Betty Friedan, it's your turn to be interrogated by the affirmative team. You have to step into the torture chamber up here. Elizabeth Fox Genovese, would you like to ask a question of Betty Friedan?
Oh, I'd love to ask a question of Betty Friedan. The ones I'd really like to ask.
All right, so that's it for that, man. I just wanted to show you this. I wanted to walk through it with you, react to it. And, look, I know it's kind of getting old because I've done this on more than one occasion. So if you want me to continue with it, I'll continue with it. If you're tired of it and you think it's run its course, I'll be done with it and get on to the next subject. I know I promised some guys I'd discuss stoicism, but I kind of pulled back from that. But, I mean, if you want it, I'll give it to you, okay? But if you got some questions you want to ask about this or some comments you want to make about this, but actually, for the members, because I kind of left everybody else out because I got some disrespectful comments in the chat, and I'm just not going to entertain that bullshit, man. Because what I'm here to do is to try to push our boundaries and to move us forward. And some people don't like that, man. They're comfortable where they are. But I've always been a limit pusher, wherever I am. And I feel like, look, we can grow, man. We can make some things happen. So that's just my view. That's my mentality. So I'll do the next one tomorrow because I want to kind of get through it. So in the next week I can get on to something else. But look, my viewpoint on all this is thus far, like I said before, these people were having these debates in the 90s. This is 1994. But it's gotten to a point where you can't say anything anymore that's critical of women who advocate for these positions. And oddly enough, the positions which are perceived as being the most extreme are the ones that we're getting bombarded with most often. And they're not perceived as extreme at all, or diversionary, or silly. But we get it as if it's the gospel. It's the honest to God's truth. So then the question becomes, well, how do we respond to that? So, I just wanted to show you this debate because I knew you probably wouldn't watch it on your own. It's maybe about an hour and 30 minutes long. So, I figured if I broke it down into segments, I could make it digestible and palatable to y'all. But at any rate, man, I'm about to sign off, man. I got some things to do. It's Friday night. Till the next time, fellas. 1.